Hi everyone, I am here with a true story. Got a new book, Amazing Modern Day Miracles. And this story is called Scandalous Love by J.A. Barber Jr. It was the early winter of 1983. I was headed south from Portland, Oregon to California on business in our recently acquired used Chevy custom van. You know, the kind with the caption chairs that swing up table and in the back a bench seat that collapsed into a bed. That's pretty cool. I was nearing Cottage Grove, Oregon, when all of a sudden the alternator warning light began burning brightly. I just noticed billboards along the highway advertising Uncle Bud's Chevrolet dealership. I still had a long trip ahead of me, so I decided to go there to have the alternator checked out. As I turned over the keys to the manager, he invited me in to sit down in the waiting room. It was going to be a while because others were in the line before me. I didn't think about it at the time, but I'd left my briefcase in the car. I could have been doing some work while I waited, but instead I picked up a magazine and had been left on the table for the customers to read. Little did I know how important reading that magazine would be. Yeah, I remember sitting in the car dealerships or in the car repair places, sitting there reading magazines. 1 week later, on a dark and cold December night, I was heading north to Portland, anxious to get home to my wife and family. Ice and snow lined the roadside, and snow flurried about. I drove through Weed, California, and was just beyond the final exit to the town when I saw two figures standing on the roadside. One of them had a thumb out as I passed by. I could tell they were wrapped in a blanket that was shielding them from the ice and snow. Oh, it's sad. Now I had a policy that I would never pick up hitchhikers, but to my own amazement, I found myself slamming on the brakes and pulling to the side of the freeway. In my rearview mirror, I saw the two figures I assumed were a man and a woman running toward me through the snow. I was at least 100 yards down the freeway, so I backed up to meet them. When they got close, I stopped and turned on the overhead light in the van. I then stepped outside into the freezing wind, walked around the car, and slid the old van door open. As they approached, I got the surprise of my life. It wasn't a man and a woman, but two men wrapped in a blanket. One of them thrust a small bundle from their arms into mine. I looked down at the bundle in the overhead light and saw a small child, a little girl. As I looked into her angelic face, terror struck my heart. Her face was blue. Without thinking, I cried, "This child is dead! This child is dead!" One of the two men began to cry and scream hysterically. The other man climbed into the van. I shouted to the man who was crying, "Get her cold and wet clothing off. You," I pointed to the other man. "Take off your coat, your shirt, get down to your bare skin. Put her body next to yours. There's a bed in the back while you can lie down. I'll head to the hospital." I didn't realize it at the time, but we were on the lone stretch of highway, and the next exit where we could get help was many miles away. As I drove, it looked hopeless. "Oh God," I prayed, "save this precious little girl." As I sped down the freeway, praying every mile of the way, I began to hear the most beautiful sound in the world, whimpering. Pretty soon the child began to scream and cry with gusto. She was alive. She was going to be okay. As we traveled north, I discovered that the father and his friend lived in Oregon. The father had only recently discovered he was indeed the father of the child. He'd also received the news that the mother of the child was going to prison. Unless he went to Texas to claim his parental rights and responsibilities, the child would be placed in long-term foster care. When he got this news, he and his buddy decided to hitchhike all the way to Texas to get the child. Then they planned to hitchhike back to Corolla Vallis. To this day, I often think about and pray for that little girl, who would now be in her 30s. I wonder what she's done with her life. I especially think about her at Christmas time, And not just because the story of Christmas is also about a small child on a cold and blustery night. No, it's because in many ways, the little girl with the blue face in the late stages of hypothermia represents you and me. Like the little girl, we were without hope. We were dead, our trespasses and sins. Until Jesus, the Son of God, came to save us. Through his Son, God took us into his scandalous love. He rescued us into the warmth of his arms. He knew exactly what we needed in order to be saved, and God knew exactly what the little girl needed to live, too. What was in the magazine I read in the waiting room at Uncle Bud's Chevrolet shop dealership? The article was all about what a person needs to do to treat hypothermia. So he knew exactly what to do just from reading that magazine in the dealership. He was meant to pick up those people. And just learning about that in that magazine, that's not a coincidence. Put your hope in the Lord, for with the Lord is unfailing love, and with him is full redemption. Psalm 137. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you guys have a great night. Good night.